Hi, welcome to Freezer Meals 101. I'm Christy.
And I'm Charla, and today we are sharing with you just one recipe. It is a French-Canadian meat pie called Tourtière, and it is a family recipe of mine. We adapted it very, very slightly, and I've never made it before. So.
And I've never eaten it. Years ago, we went to Tourtière for supper club, and your husband ordered the tortiere.
That's true.
And I'm trying to remember if I actually tried it or not. Because I said
feel like you did.
I feel like I maybe did. But if I did, wouldn't I have remembered that?
I don't know.
The squirrels are loose in there. It's like little Chippendale and the Christmas bulbs and the Christmas tree. I don't know. I don't remember. So we'll find out.
Okay, so we're gonna get to the recipe now, and then we're gonna hop back in and we're gonna share with you some things about like a French Canadian traditional Christmas and some of the other foods that might be served and all that kind of stuff. And then we want to hear about your Christmas traditions and the holiday food that you like. So I've never actually made this recipe or even seen it being made, just seen it when it's finished. So it sounds strange to me, but we're gonna give it a try and hopefully it won't fail. There's supposed to be 3 pounds of lean ground pork. We're using mostly pork, but some beef in there as well, because when I was looking at recipes for tortiere online, I noticed that most of them have a ground pork and ground beef mixture. So we're doing that, changing it up a little. Then a large onion that's minced, clove of garlic, a whole lot of salt, 1 tablespoon, then a lot of pepper. That's literally what the recipe says, a lot of pepper. So we'll see what interpretation we take on that. And we're adding right into the meat mixture 1 diced potato. We're kind of doing like 1.5 because we've added more meat than it calls for. But a lot of the tortiere recipes call for making mashed potatoes and then mixing that in. So this one is a little bit different in that your potato cooks up right with your meat. And then 1/2 cup of milk. We're supposed to cook this very slowly and then mash it really well or beat it until it's smooth. And then we're gonna add in 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, and if you want, you can also add some allspice. Once that's all done and mixed, we're going to be putting it into our pie shells. We're gonna talk about the pie shells in a minute here, but we're just using the pre-done frozen pie shells. And then we're actually freezing it raw because it's better to freeze it raw and then cook it on the day of. You will want to thaw it before you cook it. You'll cook it at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. And you'll remove the foil for the last 10 minutes. We'll see how this goes. So the recipe that we've just used it was handwritten by my Tante Giselle. If you've watched our videos for a while, then you know that
you've had her chicken fried rice.
Yeah. We have Tante Giselle's chicken fried rice that we often do as a freezer meal, and we love it.
It's so good.
It's so good.
It's got oyster sauce in it. So weird, but so delicious.
So good. And we've had, growing up, we always had the chicken fried rice at potlucks and those kind of things. And so actually, we always had it at Christmas too. But this recipe is from her, but it is actually my grandma's recipe. My dad is French, so all of his family is French and French Canadian. And by that, I mean, like, my grandma didn't speak English, French. They were French. They come from a small French community up in northern Alberta. I'm sure they don't originally come from there. They probably come from France way, way back.
Way back.
But
There are a lot of little French communities in northern Alberta.
Yes.
My sister-in-law was also from one of those French communities.
yeah, so there are like lots of little communities, and there's even one about like within an hour of us where the stop signs are both in French and English, and
true.
a lot of the signs there are
And
in French.
their street names say rue instead of street. Yeah.
And where my dad is from, there's actually a rue of his last name. So there's a street named after his family, which it's not that impressive because the community has like 1,000 people. But whatever, they were one of the more
nice.
original families there. And I still have cousins up there and an uncle up there. So this recipe is like from my grandma, which is my mamé, is how we said that. And I did grow up speaking French. I went to school in French and in English, so French immersion, because my grandma couldn't speak English. So it just made it easier for me to communicate with her.
That's kind of important.
And my mom didn't really speak French. So that made for some interesting family gatherings.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Our family gatherings, I mean, we're not French at all. I have a Scottish heritage on both sides of my family, so there was always talk about who was going to bring the haggis. Nobody ever brought the haggis. I've never eaten haggis. We did eat a lot of porridge, which is, a very known Scottish thing. But otherwise, yeah, no blood sausage, no weird Scottish foods. So I'm always interested in hearing about these kinds of, this morning I was reading about people who didn't know what a Christmas cracker was from the UK.
Ooh.
In Canada, we have we have British influence here, so we know about Christmas crackers, but we never used them growing up.
Oh, we did. Always. On my mom's side, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
English side of the family, not the French side of the family. We had the Christmas crackers, and then you had the little hat.
You had to wear the
paper
crown,
hat.
wear the paper crown. Yeah, not food necessarily, but still a Christmas tradition, a holiday tradition. So we want to hear about yours. We love that kind of stuff because we're like people.
Yes, and like we're fascinated by not just the traditions, but of course, since we love food.
What are your food traditions? Something we have discovered. Recently we did a video about Thanksgiving sides, and it came up in the comments that we were doing our dressing, stuffing, all wrong. A, do you call it stuffing or dressing?
Yeah.
And B, we didn't make it with cornbread. And the women from the South were like almost personally insulted. And so even different pockets.
We've never heard of cornbread stuffing before.
I think I still want to try and make it for Christmas. Oysters or no, I'm going to try and make it. And so there was like these pockets of, and Canada's the same because we're so big and so multicultural.
Diverse, yeah.
There's all these pockets of these different things that you can do that just become traditions, and we'd love to hear them. We love to hear that kind of stuff.
So I'm wearing my Canada shirt today because we're talking about French-Canadian Christmas traditions. So for traditional French-Canadian Christmas, we have something called the Réveillon, which is Christmas, basically. That's not actually what it translates into. I don't know what it translates into, but that's not the point. This is how it works. It's so different from how we did Christmas on my mom's side of the family. So Christmas Eve, you go to midnight mass, and depending on whether it was like up north or here, the mass was either 1 hour or 3 hours. Now, most French Canadians at that time were Catholic. I'm not sure if that still holds true, but I would think that a lot of them still are.
Probably.
And so you would go to this mass that was Catholic mass that was literally like up to 3 hours, and you'd sit there in your, in the mass starting at midnight. So if you do the 3 hour one, which one year we did, you get home from that, it's now after 3 a.m, and at that time you have the Réveillon, which is the feast, like all the food.
Wow.
And it's
cool.
all ready already.
Sure.
And so a lot of things are make ahead. And I know for my aunts and my grandma and my mame, they did do their meat pies, the tourtière, ahead, freeze them, and then cook them on the day of. So this actual part of it is traditional. Like, we grew up doing them from frozen and, you know, cooking them the day of.
Yeah.
And there's always a bûche de Noël, which is a Yule log. And so
I'm going to give you a picture of one because my brother-in-law, he spent time in culinary school, and maybe it was before the pandemic. I want to say in 2018, he brought a Yule log and he did little meringue mushrooms, and it was...
Oh, he's fancy.
It was fancy. It was very nice. So I'll see if I can dig up a picture and give it to you.
Ours were never that fancy.
Yeah.
And never, you know, a work of art, but usually there would be a jelly roll, which, you know, would be kind of a separate thing, although it looks similar because it's the roll.
Made similar, yeah.
But our bûche de Noël would be chocolate and whipped cream and then like a chocolate icing. But my mom, when she would do it, again, she's not French, but when she would do one for our réveillon, she would make like some knots in the wood and stuff with the icing and just make it look more like a log, right? And then put some little holly and, you know, those kind of decorations on it, so it did look Christmassy. That's nice. And we would have, I'm not sure exactly what is, I know that chicken fried rice is, for our family, is a thing. Chop suey was a huge thing.
Yes, I want to say I knew people that, well, there would be lots of times for Christmas we would get together and have homemade Chinese food that people would spend days preparing because there's so many steps and so many, the breading and the preparations, and we would have full on Chinese food feasts.
Yeah. So I don't know how the chicken fried rice and Chinese and chop suey became part of our Christmas traditions being French, but somehow that made it into our family traditions. And we always did the cocktail sausages boiled in maple syrup. Yeah. And maple syrup is very French Canadian. Very. So we also do sugar pie, but not on Christmas. That is, you know, just an aside. Anything sugar. Right. And it's French Canadian. Like,
yes. Yeah. Rappy pie. Have you heard of rappy pie? It's a maritime thing. If you're in the Maritimes, Jan, talk to me. Tell me about rappy pie. My husband spent quite a bit of time in Nova Scotia. It just made me think of it. I'm really sorry.
No, you're good. We're chatty. That's established.
My husband spent quite a bit of time in Nova Scotia in his youth, and he said he ate rappy pie, and it was made with potatoes. And beyond that, I've never really found it. I've looked a few times, not that extensively, because the idea of a potato pie doesn't sound all that appealing to me. But if you have a recipe, or if you know what I'm talking about, send me a link. Hit me up. I would like to know. I would attempt to make it. I'm adventurous.
Yes.
I would make the things.
He would like that.
Yeah.
It would be sweet, right?
And then I wouldn't have to make him that awful cake for his birthday.
Oh, the Black Forest cake.
I don't even like it. And it's his mom's recipe, and it's just awful to put together. I love her. I love him. But now his sister lives here, so she makes it for him.
You're out of
I'm off the hook. I'm off the hook. I started making it into a trifle because it was such a terrible thing to put together. Okay.
So then we would eat the big feast, and then we would get to open our gifts. Like, no kidding, it is now
like 6 a.m.
4 anyway.
Yeah.
And you're now opening your gifts. And so I remember as a kid, I don't know how old I would have been. We didn't do this every year, but when we did the full réveillons, one of the years, I might have been like 8 or 9, and I got to stay up till 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, that would have been huge when you were a kid.
It was hard to stay awake, but you want.
Well, and we were with family and
there's so
energy.
Much chatter.
Yeah.
And I had on both my families, actually pretty large families, and so, you know, cousins, and on that side of the family, because they lived pretty far away, it was like cousins that I only saw maybe once a year, once every few years, a lot of them. and then a few that lived locally that I knew really well. But it was exciting to see your cousins, and they were all way older than my brother and I. And so
you look up to them.
Yeah, and they are, it's not that exciting for them to stay up that late, but for me, like it was a thrill. So I have fond memories of these French Canadian Christmases that we did a few times.
That's neat.
Because that wasn't wasn't our usual for what we did. But my husband and I have tried to incorporate like a little bit of, he's Dutch, so we have some things from his culture and some things from my mom's side and my dad's side, and so we've tried to incorporate a few things. And so we do gifts with our kids Christmas Eve and stockings Christmas morning, because that kind of incorporates that whole Christmas Eve celebrating thing. And we don't usually do a bûche de Noël, but I do my mama's jelly roll sometimes.
What is it? A bûche de Noël? Oh,
that's
is that the log thing? The log.
So, okay, so for this tortiere, we are doing frozen pie crusts. Now, my aunt and my grandma would be mortified, I'm sure.
We won't tell them. Your grandma,
yeah,
she won't know.
She passed away many years ago.
And
so
maybe she'll watch the Sorry Tante Giselle.
Yeah, we're not doing pie crust from scratch.
We're the freezer meal people, not the baking people.
No, and and I'm sure, and actually in researching for this recipe, there's something with like bread cubes and soaking them, and there's a lot of stuff. We're just taking like the filling, we're putting it in frozen pie crust. How we're gonna do it is we're using deep shell pie crusts for the bottom, and then we have been thawing some frozen like non-deep shell regular pie crusts for the top, and we're just gonna try to make it look like a pie.
I do that all the time.
Okay.
I can make it look like a pie.
So because this is our first time doing tourtiere, and again, I know we're not doing it justice because we're not doing it all from scratch, but we're doing what we can do. Done is better than perfect. All
Absolutely.
the things. But if you have tips, if you know how to make this
tortiere, give us your tortiere tips.
Yes.
We want to know. That's about as French as I get. And I grew up in northern Alberta. Go figure.
So
that was it.
I hope that you enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about some of my childhood Christmas traditions. And what we really wanted to do with this video is just get a conversation going about learning more about you, what your Christmas traditions are, what your holiday traditions are, what food you enjoy at the holidays, what you grew up with at Christmas that maybe you don't do now or you still do now. Like, we want to hear all about it.
And how did you incorporate your families for Christmas traditions? Your mom has a lot of Ukrainian influence, yes?
So my mom is not actually Ukrainian. My sister-in-law is, but my mom grew up in a Ukrainian town.
Right.
Again, in Alberta, different part of Alberta. And so we have very much at Christmas, we always have pierogies, sometimes cabbage rolls, nalishnika, petishke, all the things.
All the things.
But
you don't do Ukrainian Christmas.
No, I have done Ukrainian Christmas once. A friend invited me, and it was like
all the 12 dishes.
All of it. But we don't do that, but we incorporate. So it's very interesting because my mom is like a mix of English, Scottish, or like all of the kind of European things. And so there's little bits of those in like the Christmas crackers we were talking about. There's little bits of those influences. But we also have those Ukrainian influences because of how she grew up and the community she grew up in. So it's
funny.
Really interesting how like everything kind of, you get all these different cultures and they come together and you kind of create your own things.
That's lovely.
So thank you for joining us today. Try making your own meat pie maybe.
It doesn't hurt to try, and it's wonderful to learn new things and new traditions, so give it a try and let us know how it goes.
Happy cooking.